They said my name over the loudspeaker at Memorial Stadium, and for the first time in my life, my brother Jake went completely silent. I stood on that pitcher's mound in my navy blue blazer, holding the microphone as thousands of people rose to their feet, applauding not for him, but for me. The irony wasn't lost on anyone in that stadium. 3 months earlier, Jake had looked me dead in the eye during his minor league game and said the words that would haunt him forever. "Maya, face it, you never accomplished anything." Now here I was, about to throw the ceremonial first pitch before his biggest game of the season, as they prepared to retire my college jersey number and announce my new position as the youngest female director of player development in Major League Baseball history. My parents sat in the front row, their faces a mixture of pride and something that looks suspiciously like regret. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My father, who had coached baseball for 15 years before selling insurance, kept adjusting his cap like he couldn't quite believe what he was witnessing. My mother clutched her purse so tightly her knuckles had turned white. They had spent years pouring every resource, every ounce of attention, every dollar into Jake's baseball dreams, while treating my softball career like an expensive hobby that would eventually fade away. Tonight, as I stood where Jake had always dreamed of standing, the roles had completely reversed. But this moment didn't happen overnight, and it certainly didn't happen without cost. To understand how I went from being the invisible daughter to the woman Major League Baseball was fighting to hire, you need to know about the family dinners where my achievements were footnotes to Jake's headlines, the scholarship conversations where I wasn't even included, and the breaking point that came on a humid Tuesday evening when I realized I would never be enough for the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. This isn't just about sibling rivalry or sports. It's about what happens when you stop waiting for permission to be extraordinary and start building your own definition of success. The Chen family looked perfect from the outside, and in Riverside, California, that meant everything. Our house sat on Maple Street, in one of those neighborhoods where every lawn was precisely edged, and every driveway showcased the kind of cars that suggested steady, respectable career. My father, Robert, had built his reputation coaching championship baseball teams at Riverside High for 15 years before transitioning into insurance, where he applied the same methodical approach to helping families plan for their future. My mother, Linda, ran Sterling Elementary like a well-oiled machine, her principal's office decorated with photos of student achievements and motivational quotes about reaching your potential. From the street, our two-story colonial with its hunter green shutters and perfectly maintained flower beds looked like the kind of place where American dreams came true. Neighbors waved from their identical driveways as they loaded designer sports equipment into their SUVs, heading to yet another weekend tournament. Inside our house, family photos lined the hallway in chronological order, capturing birthday parties, holiday gatherings, and graduation ceremonies where everyone smiled on cue. The living room showcased my mother's taste for coordinated furniture and my father's collection of coaching memorabilia, creating an atmosphere that felt both welcoming and carefully curated. But beneath this polished surface, our family operated according to an invisible hierarchy that had been established long before I was old enough to understand its rules. Success was measured in statistics, scholarships, and newspaper headlines. Love was expressed through attendance at games, investment in equipment, and the pride that came from watching your child excel in ways that reflected well on your parenting. Dinner table conversations revolved around batting averages, recruiting prospects, and the kind of strategic planning that would make a military general proud. In the Chen household, athletic achievement wasn't just encouraged, it was the primary language through which affection was communicated. My brother Jake had been speaking this language fluently since he could hold a bat. 2 years older than me, Jake possessed the kind of natural charisma that made him impossible to ignore. He walked into every room like he belonged there, flashed a smile that could charm teachers into extending deadlines, and displayed the kind of confidence that made other kids want to follow him. On the baseball field, he was pure poetry in motion. His swing was so smooth it looked effortless. His arm so strong he could throw strikes from deep in the hole at shortstop, and his understanding of the game so intuitive that coaches called him a student of baseball before he'd even reached high school. Jake's bedroom walls told the story of a career destined for greatness. Trophies filled two tall bookcases, their golden figures frozen in batting stances and pitching motion. Newspaper clippings covered his bulletin board, headlines proclaiming, "Jake Chin leads Riverside to championship," and local Funham catches eye of college scout. His dresser displayed baseballs signed by professional players who had visited our high school, each one representing another connection to the world he was determined to join. The centerpiece was a framed photo of him shaking hands with a major league scout, both of them grinning like they shared a secret about Jake's inevitable future. When Jake stepped onto any baseball field, the atmosphere changed. Parents stopped their conversations to watch his warm-up routine. Opposing coaches gathered near the dugout to observe his batting practice. Teammates deferred to his judgment on strategy and positioning, even when he was just a freshman playing varsity ball. His success seemed so natural, so predetermined, that our family structured everything around supporting and nurturing his obvious talent. Vacation schedules revolved around tournament dates, family meals were planned around his practice schedule, and household conversations inevitably returned to discussions of his latest performance or upcoming opportunity. In contrast, I had learned to navigate our family dynamic by finding my place in the spaces Jake didn't occupy. While he commanded attention on the baseball diamond, I discovered my own athletic abilities on the softball field, where the game moved faster and required different skills. I was drawn to the strategic elements, the way defensive positioning could shut down an entire offensive approach, the psychological chess match between pitcher and batter. My coaches noticed that I could read hitters before they even settled into the batter's box, anticipating their tendencies based on subtle cues in their stance or timing. My bedroom reflected a different kind of athletic journey. Softball trophies occupied a single shelf, pushed toward the back to make room for textbooks and college brochures. A few newspaper clippings from local games were tucked into my mirror frame, but they were small articles buried on the sports page, not front-page headlines. My walls displayed academic certificates alongside athletic achievements, creating a collage that suggested I was hedging my bets rather than pursuing a singular passion. The overall effect was of someone who was successful but not quite successful enough to warrant the kind of attention that filled Jake's room. During family gatherings, the difference in how our achievements were celebrated became painfully obvious. When Jake hit his first home run in varsity baseball, our father called every relative to share the news, and our mother posted photos on social media with captions about her future major leaguer. When I pitched a no-hitter in the regional semifinals, earning my team a spot in the state tournament, the accomplishment was mentioned briefly during dinner before the conversation shifted to Jake's upcoming showcase tournament. The message was clear: Jake's successes were family victories worth celebrating, while mine were personal accomplishments that reflected well on my individual character, but didn't necessarily elevate our family's status in the community. This dynamic became even more pronounced during the college recruitment process, when our living room transformed into a war room dedicated to Jake's future. Recruiting letters covered the coffee table in neat stacks, organized by division level and scholarship potential. Our father maintained a spreadsheet tracking which coaches had expressed interest, what their programs needed, and how Jake's statistics compared to their current roster. Phone calls from college coaches were treated like state visits, with our entire family gathering around the speakerphone to listen as grown men competed for the privilege of coaching Jake through his college years. Meanwhile, my own recruitment process happened quietly in the background. I researched schools on my own, filled out questionnaires without fanfare, and scheduled campus visits around Jake's tournament schedule. When coaches called our house asking to speak with me, they were often told I'd call them back because we were busy discussing Jake's options. The implicit message was that my college choice was a personal decision that shouldn't disrupt the family's primary focus on launching Jake's professional baseball career. The contrast became most evident during our senior year holiday dinner, when the conversation turned to college announcement. Jake had received offers from 3 Division I programs, including one that came with a full scholarship and the promise of immediate playing time. As he shared the details of each offer, our parents listened with the intensity of investors evaluating portfolio options. They asked detailed questions about coaching philosophies, academic support programs, and professional development opportunities, treating Jake's college decision like the business decision it had become. When the attention finally turned to my plans, I mentioned that I had received a partial scholarship to UC Riverside, a Division I program with a strong softball tradition and an excellent sports psychology department. The news was met with polite congratulations and immediate questions about how I planned to cover the remaining costs. While Jake's full ride was celebrated as validation of his talent and our family's investment in his development, my partial scholarship was treated as a stepping stone that would require careful financial planning and realistic expectations about future opportunity. The evening that changed everything began like so many others, with our family gathered around the dining room table sharing takeout from Golden Dragon, our favorite Chinese restaurant. Jake had just returned from a successful college visit, and the energy in the room was electric with possibility. He described the campus facilities, the coaching staff's recruiting pitch, and the current team's chemistry with the enthusiasm of someone who had found exactly where he belonged. Our parents listened with rapt attention, asking follow-up questions, and taking mental notes about every detail that might influence his final decision. As Jake finished describing the professional quality weight room and the team's spring training trip to Arizona, our father leaned back in his chair with the satisfied expression of someone whose long-term planning was finally paying dividends. Our mother began calculating timelines for campus visits and scholarship paperwork, her principal's organizational skills seamlessly transitioning from school administration to family logistics. The conversation felt like a celebration of dreams that were about to become reality, a family moment that would be remembered as the night when Jake's future crystallized into something tangible and exciting. It was during this euphoric planning session that I made the mistake of assuming I was part of the family's college conversation. I had received an email earlier that day from Coach Maria Rodriguez at UC Riverside, informing me that I had been selected for their leadership program, which would provide additional academic support and mentoring opportunities beyond my athletic scholarship. The program was highly competitive, accepting only 5 student athletes each year, and I was the first softball player to be chosen in the program's 3-year history. I got some good news today, too, I said during a brief lull in the Jake-focused festivity. Coach Rodriguez told me I was accepted into UC Riverside's leadership development program. It's a really big deal. They only take 5 athletes total, and I'm the first softball player they've ever selected. The silence that followed my announcement was so complete I could hear the refrigerator humming in the kitchen. My father set down his chopsticks and looked at me with the kind of expression usually reserved for someone who had just interrupted an important business meeting with irrelevant.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
Information. My mother's smile faltered slightly as if she was trying to calculate whether my news required the same level of enthusiasm they had been lavishing on Jake's opportunity. Jake, still riding the high of his own success, barely looked up from his phone where he was presumably texting friends about his campus visit. The leadership program that had felt like such a validation of my potential suddenly seemed trivial in the context of Division I baseball scholarships and professional development opportunities. I realized that in my family's hierarchy of achievement, being the first softball player selected for an academic leadership program ranked somewhere below being recruited to play a sport that actually mattered. "That's nice, honey," my mother said finally, her voice carrying the tone she used when praising elementary school students for effort rather than results. "It sounds like a great opportunity for you to develop some useful skills." The word useful hit me like a physical blow. Jake's baseball opportunities were investments in a future career, pathways to professional success that would bring honor to our family name. My leadership program was useful, a nice addition to a resume that would help me in whatever practical career I eventually pursued after my athletic hobby ran its course. Our father nodded approvingly, but his attention was already shifting back to Jake's scholarship paperwork. "Those kinds of programs look good on job applications," he said. "Smart thinking, Maya. You're always so practical about planning for life after sports." Life after sports, the phrase echoed in my mind as I watched my family seamlessly return to their Jake-centered conversation. While they planned for his life during sports, his professional athletic career, his potential for national recognition. I was being praised for thinking practically about what I would do when my athletic participation ended. The message was clear: Jake was an athlete with unlimited potential, while I was a student who happened to play sports as a character-building exercise. That night, lying in my bed listening to my parents' muffled voices discussing Jake's college visits through the thin walls, I finally understood my place in our family's narrative. I wasn't the daughter whose achievements brought pride and status to the Chen name. I was the responsible one, the practical one, the one who would figure things out on her own because that's what practical people do. My successes were expected rather than celebrated. My struggles were character-building exercises rather than obstacles requiring family support. For the first time in my 18 years, I allowed myself to imagine what it would feel like to be the child whose dreams mattered most, whose phone calls from coaches interrupted family dinners, whose achievements were announced to relatives and posted on social media with proud captions. I pictured walking into a room and having conversations stop because people wanted to hear about my latest accomplishment, having my parents take days off work to attend my competitions, seeing my trophies displayed prominently, instead of pushed to the back of a shelf. But as I lay there in the darkness, listening to my family plan Jake's future with the same intensity that military strategists plan campaigns, I made a decision that would change the trajectory of my entire life. I decided to stop waiting for them to see me the way they saw him. I decided to stop measuring my worth by their attention, and start building something that would make their recognition irrelevant. I didn't need them to believe I was extraordinary. I just needed to prove it to myself, and let the results speak louder than their silence ever could. The Chen family's veneer of perfection had been carefully constructed over years of calculated decisions and strategic omission. From the outside, we embodied the American dream in suburban California, complete with matching Christmas sweaters and coordinated family photos that our mother displayed throughout the house like evidence of our happiness. The reality beneath this polished surface was far more complex, governed by unspoken rules about whose dreams deserved investment and whose achievements warranted celebration. Our neighborhood of Riverside had been deliberately chosen for its proximity to elite youth sports facilities and its reputation for producing college-bound athletes. Every street corner seemed to lead to another baseball diamond or training facility, and weekend mornings brought a parade of families loading equipment bags into luxury SUVs, heading to tournaments that cost more than some people's monthly salary. The Chens fit seamlessly into this culture of competitive parenting and athletic excellence, or at least we appeared to from the carefully curated image our parents projected to the community. My father's transition from high school baseball coach to insurance agent had been motivated primarily by financial necessity, but he approached his new career with the same analytical mind that had made him successful on the diamond. He understood risk assessment, long-term planning, and the importance of making strategic investments that would pay dividends over time. When it came to his children's futures, he applied these same principles with ruthless efficiency, calculating which opportunities offered the best return on investment, and which dreams were worth funding versus which were expensive hobbies that would eventually be abandoned. My mother's role as elementary school principal had given her extensive experience in identifying talent and potential in young people, but her assessments of her own children seemed filtered through a lens of traditional expectations and gender-based assumptions about athletic career. She could spot academic giftedness in a third grader's reading comprehension, recognize leadership potential in a shy student's class presentation, and identify the subtle signs of learning differences that required specialized support. Yet when it came to evaluating her daughter's athletic achievements, she seemed unable to see beyond the cultural narrative that positioned softball as baseball's less important sister sport. The morning routines in our house revealed the true hierarchy of priority. Jake's breakfast was timed precisely to optimize his energy levels for afternoon practice, complete with protein supplements and vitamins that our father researched with scientific thoroughness. His equipment bags were checked and rechecked the night before, ensuring that every glove was properly conditioned and every uniform was competition-ready. Weather reports were consulted to determine whether he needed additional layers or rain gear, and backup plans were discussed in case field conditions required schedule changes. My own preparation happened with significantly less fanfare and attention to detail. I packed my own equipment bag, made my own breakfast, and checked the weather using my phone rather than relying on parental oversight. When I mentioned needing new cleats or requesting funds for a hitting lesson, the conversation invariably included questions about cost-effectiveness and necessity that were never asked when Jake expressed similar needs. The implicit message was that his athletic pursuits were investments in our family's future, while mine were personal expenses that required justification and budget consideration. School became another arena where these disparities played out in subtle but meaningful ways. Teachers and administrators who recognized the Chen name automatically associated it with Jake's baseball excellence, often greeting me with comments like, "You must be Jake's sister," or "I bet you're quite the athlete too, given your family's reputation." These interactions reinforced my position as an appendage to Jake's story rather than the protagonist of my own narrative, and I learned to smile and deflect rather than attempt to establish my own identity within the school's social ecosystem. The athletic department's bulletin boards provided a visual representation of how achievements were valued and displayed. Jake's newspaper clippings occupied prominent positions near the main office, updated regularly with each new accolade or recruitment milestone. Photos from his games were professionally framed and hung in the hallway leading to the gymnasium, creating a gallery that celebrated his journey from freshman phenom to Division I prospect. The softball team's achievements were documented as well, but in smaller formats and less visible locations, as if our successes were worth acknowledging but not necessarily promoting. During parent-teacher conferences, the conversations about Jake focused on maintaining his GPA for athletic eligibility while managing the stress of recruitment and tournament travel. Teachers spoke about accommodating his schedule, providing extra support during tournament seasons, and ensuring that his academic record would meet college admission requirements. The discussions about my academic performance centered on maximizing my potential for academic scholarships, developing practical skills for career preparation, and maintaining the well-rounded profile that would serve me well in whatever field I eventually chose to pursue. The difference in how our social lives were managed reflected these same underlying assumptions about our respective futures. Jake's friendships were viewed as networking opportunities that could lead to baseball connections, training partnerships, and recruitment advantage. When he wanted to attend overnight camps or showcase tournaments in other states, the expenses were approved without hesitation because they represented investments in his athletic development and exposure to college scouts. My social activities were evaluated through a different lens entirely. Overnight softball camps were approved only if they offered academic components or leadership development opportunities that would enhance my college applications beyond athletics. The cost-benefit analysis for my activities always included discussions about practical value and transferable skills, as if every decision had to be justified by its potential contribution to a non-athletic career path. Family vacations were planned around Jake's tournament schedule, with destinations chosen based on their proximity to showcase events or college campuses he wanted to visit. Our summer trips to San Diego coincided with a major tournament series where college scouts gathered to evaluate prospects, turning what should have been family leisure time into another opportunity for Jake's athletic advancement. My own tournament schedule was accommodated when possible but never served as the primary determining factor in family travel plans. The financial investments in our respective athletic careers told the most revealing story about our family's priorities and expectations. Jake's equipment upgrades happened automatically as he grew and his skills developed, with new bats, gloves, and training gear purchased without discussion of cost or necessity. His private hitting and pitching lessons were scheduled weekly with former professional players who charged premium rates for their expertise. Summer travel team fees, tournament entry costs, and showcase participation expenses were paid without hesitation, viewed as essential investments in his future earning potential. My equipment needs were addressed more pragmatically with careful consideration of whether upgrades were truly necessary or simply desired. Private lessons were approved occasionally, usually as birthday or Christmas gifts rather than regular training investments. Tournament travel was supported when budgets allowed, but I learned to fundraise for additional opportunities rather than assume family financial backing. The message was clear that while my athletic participation was valued and supported,
it was not considered a pathway to financial independence or professional success. The college recruitment process amplified these disparities in the most painful way possible. Jake's recruitment began during his sophomore year of high school when college coaches started attending his games and sending introductory letters expressing interest in his potential. Our dining room table became command central for managing his recruitment, with folders organized by school, spreadsheets tracking communication timelines, and calendars marking visit dates and application deadlines. The entire family became invested in optimizing his recruiting process, researching programs, preparing for coach interactions, and strategizing about official visit timing. My own recruitment happened almost as an afterthought, managed primarily through my high school coach and my own research efforts. While Jake received guidance from our parents about which questions to ask during campus visits and how to evaluate scholarship offers, I navigated these decisions largely independently. College coaches who called our house were sometimes told I wasn't available because we were busy with Jake's recruiting activities, sending a clear message about whose athletic future took precedence in our family's daily operation. The emotional toll of these systematic differences began to accumulate during my junior year of high school when I started to understand that my achievements would always be measured against Jake's rather than evaluated on their own merit. When I was selected as team captain for the softball team, the accomplishment was acknowledged with brief congratulations before the conversation shifted to Jake's latest batting statistic. When I led my team to the regional championship game, the achievement was celebrated at dinner but didn't warrant the extended family phone tree that announced Jake's tournament victory. The most revealing moment came during a family barbecue when our uncle asked about our respective college plans. Jake launched into a detailed description of his recruitment process, the scholarship offers he was considering, and his goals for playing professionally after college. The assembled relatives listened with rapt attention, asking follow-up questions and offering advice about program selection and career development. When the conversation eventually turned to my plans, I mentioned my interest in sports psychology and my hope to work in athletic administration after college. The response was polite but noticeably less enthusiastic, with comments about having practical backup plans and pursuing stable career paths. Jake's pathway seemed linear and predetermined, a clear trajectory from high school excellence to college success to professional opportunity. My journey was viewed as more complex and uncertain, requiring careful planning for multiple contingencies and realistic expectations about long-term prospects. The underlying assumption was that his athletic talent would open doors and create opportunities, while mine would provide college access and character development, before transitioning into a more conventional career path.
The psychological impact of living in Jake's shadow began to manifest in ways I didn't initially recognize or understand. I became hypercritical of my own performances, analyzing every mistake and missed opportunity with intensity that exceeded even my coach's expectations. I developed a perfectionist streak that made me reluctant to take risks or attempt plays that might result in failure, preferring safe choices that guaranteed competent results over bold moves that could lead to either spectacular success or visible mistakes. My relationship with confidence became complicated and conditional, dependent on external validation that came infrequently and felt temporary when it arrived. When coaches praised my strategic thinking or game awareness, I cherished these moments while simultaneously doubting their sincerity or significance. When teammates sought my advice about situational hitting or defensive positioning, I provided help willingly but struggled to internalize that my knowledge and insights had genuine value beyond the immediate context. The summer before my senior year brought a series of events that would begin to challenge my understanding of my own potential and worth. I had been selected to participate in an elite softball camp at UC Riverside, where college coaches would evaluate prospects for recruitment and scholarship consideration. The camp represented an opportunity to showcase my skills against top-level competition while learning from coaches who had developed numerous professional players and Olympic athletes. My parents' reaction to this opportunity reflected their ingrained assumptions about the relative value of our respective athletic pursuits. While they agreed to cover the camp fees, the decision was accompanied by discussions about cost and questions about whether the investment would lead to meaningful scholarship opportunities. The contrast with their automatic approval of Jake's showcase tournaments was stark and painful, reinforcing my growing awareness that I would need to justify every step of my athletic journey in ways that he never experienced. The camp itself proved to be a transformative experience, not because of any single dramatic moment, but through the accumulation of small interactions that began to shift my understanding of my own capability. The college coaches running the camp evaluated players based on multiple criteria beyond raw athletic ability, including game intelligence, leadership potential, coachability, and mental toughness. For the first time in my athletic career, I found myself in an environment where strategic thinking and psychological understanding were valued as highly as physical skill. During the camp's scrimmage games, I discovered that my ability to read opposing hitters and adjust defensive positioning gave our team significant advantages in crucial situations. Coaches began pulling me aside to discuss my observations about opposing players' tendencies and asking for my input on strategic decisions that would normally be made exclusively by coaching staff. The experience of having my analytical insights valued and implemented by respected authorities in the sport began to plant seeds of confidence that would eventually grow into something more substantial. The most significant interaction occurred during a one-on-one meeting with Coach Maria Rodriguez, UC Riverside's head softball coach and one of the most respected figures in collegiate athletics. Coach Rodriguez had played professionally in Europe after college and had developed a reputation for identifying and developing players who succeeded through intelligence and determination rather than just natural talent. Her approach to the game emphasized mental preparation, strategic execution, and the kind of leadership that elevated entire teams rather than individual statistics. Coach Rodriguez asked me about my long-term goals and aspirations, both in softball and beyond. As I described my interest in sports psychology and athletic administration, I expected the polite but dismissive response I had grown accustomed to receiving when discussing my future plans. Instead, she leaned forward with genuine interest and began asking detailed questions about my observations of team dynamics, player motivation, and the psychological factors that influenced performance in high-pressure situations. "You see the game differently than most players," she told me during our conversation. "You understand that softball is as much about mental strategy as physical execution, and that's a rare perspective at any level. Have you ever considered that your future in athletics might be about more than just playing?" This question opened a door in my mind that I hadn't known existed. For years, I had been measuring my athletic worth against Jake's achievements, assuming that my value in sports was limited to my performance as a player. Coach Rodriguez was suggesting that my analytical mind, strategic thinking, and understanding of team psychology might represent strengths that were valuable in their own right, not just consolation prizes for lacking Jake's natural talent. She began describing the various career paths available in collegiate and professional athletics for people who understood the game from multiple perspectives: athletic administration, player development, scouting, sports psychology, and coaching all required the kind of analytical thinking and strategic understanding that she had observed in my approach to softball. These weren't backup careers for failed athletes, but specialized fields that required specific skills and insights that couldn't be taught to just anyone. As our conversation continued, I realized that Coach Rodriguez was seeing potential in me that my own family had never recognized or acknowledged. She wasn't evaluating me as a less talented version of my brother, but as someone with unique capabilities that could contribute to athletics in ways that pure playing ability couldn't match. The possibility that my future in sports might be defined by my strengths rather than my limitations was simultaneously thrilling and terrifying. The camp concluded with individual evaluations and recommendations for college recruitment. Coach Rodriguez's assessment of my potential included not just my playing abilities, but her observations about my leadership qualities, strategic thinking, and potential for continued development. She mentioned that UC Riverside had recently launched a leadership development program specifically designed for student athletes who showed potential for careers in athletic administration and sports psychology. When I returned home from camp and shared this information with my family, their response was predictably lukewarm. My mother expressed approval of the academic components, while questioning whether the athletic scholarship would be sufficient to make college affordable. My father asked practical questions about career prospects and earning potential in sports administration, clearly skeptical about whether such a path would provide financial stability. Jake listened politely but seemed unable to understand why anyone would want to work in athletics without being a star player. The conversation that followed revealed the fundamental disconnect between my family's understanding of success and the possibilities that Coach Rodriguez had helped me envision. They saw athletics as a means to an end, valuable only if it led to scholarship money or professional playing opportunity. The idea that sports could be a career field requiring specialized knowledge and skills seemed foreign to their worldview, which divided life into clear categories of practical careers and expensive hobbies. For the first time, I began to understand that my family's inability to see my potential wasn't necessarily a reflection of my limitations, but of their narrow definition of what constituted athletic success and valuable achievement. Their focus on Jake's playing career had blinded them to other ways of contributing to sports, just as their emphasis on traditional career paths had prevented them from recognizing the legitimacy of athletic administration as a professional field. This realization marked the beginning of a subtle but significant shift in how I viewed my relationship with my family and my own future. Instead of continuing to seek their validation for dreams they couldn't understand, I began to consider the possibility of building a path that would make their approval irrelevant. Coach Rodriguez had shown me that there were people in the world who valued my particular combination of skills and insights, even if those people weren't related to me by blood. The leadership development program at UC Riverside represented more than just an academic opportunity. It was a chance to develop my potential in an environment where my analytical mind and strategic thinking would be seen as assets, rather than consolation prizes. The program would provide mentorship from successful women in athletic administration, internship opportunities with professional sports organizations, and the kind of specialized training that could prepare me for a career that my family had never imagined possible. As I began my senior year of high school, I carried with me a new understanding of my own worth and potential. The validation I had received from Coach Rodriguez wasn't a substitute for family recognition. It was evidence that there was a wider world beyond my family's narrow perspective, a world where my particular talents were not only valued but desperately needed. The question was whether I would have the courage to pursue that world, even if it meant walking away from my family's expectations and forging my own path toward a future they might never understand or appreciate. The tension that had been building in our household finally reached its breaking point on a sweltering Thursday evening in late July. Jake had just returned from a week-long showcase tournament in Arizona, where he had performed exceptionally well in front of dozens of college scouts. His phone had been ringing constantly with coaches expressing interest, and our parents were practically glowing with pride as they fielded calls and organized information packets. The dining room had transformed into a recruitment command center with laptop computers displaying college baseball programs, notebooks filled with coach contact information, and spreadsheets tracking scholarship offers and visit schedules. I had spent that same week working at a local youth softball camp, teaching fundamental skills to girls aged 8 through 14. The experience had been incredibly rewarding, as I discovered a natural ability to break down complex techniques into understandable components and help young players overcome mental barriers that were limiting their performance. Several parents had approached me to express gratitude for the breakthrough moments their daughters had experienced under my guidance, and the camp director had asked if I would be interested in returning as a junior instructor the following summer. The contrast between how our respective weeks were received and celebrated by our family could not have been more stark. Jake's tournament success was treated as headline news, with detailed discussions of his performance statistics, the scouts who had expressed interest, and the potential scholarship implications of his achievement. My work at the softball camp was acknowledged with brief congratulations, before the conversation immediately returned to analyzing Jake's recruitment prospects and planning his upcoming official visits to college campuses. As we sat around the dinner table that evening, our father spread out a collection of recruiting letters and scholarship offer sheets, like a general planning a military campaign. Each document was analyzed for its strategic implications, with discussions about program prestige, coaching staff stability, academic requirements, and geographic consideration. Jake sat in the center of this attention like a young emperor receiving tribute from distant kingdoms, offering his opinions about which programs appealed to him and which coaches had made the strongest impressions during their recruitment pitches. My mother had prepared Jake's favorite meal to celebrate his tournament success, complete with a homemade cake, decorated with a baseball diamond and congratulatory message. The entire evening felt orchestrated to reinforce his position as the family's crown prince, the chosen one whose achievements warranted this level of celebration and strategic planning. I sat at the table feeling like a spectator at someone else's life, watching my family pour their energy and enthusiasm into a future that had no room for my own dreams and aspirations. The conversation that would shatter my understanding of my place in our family began innocuously enough, with our father asking about my college application timeline and scholarship prospects. I had been working with my high school counselor to navigate the recruitment process largely on my own, since my parents' attention was so completely focused on Jake's opportunity. I had submitted applications to several schools with strong softball programs, including UC Riverside, where Coach Rodriguez had expressed genuine interest in both my athletic and academic potential. "I've been in regular contact with Coach Rodriguez at UC Riverside," I said, attempting to inject some enthusiasm into my voice despite the lukewarm reception I expected. "She thinks I have a real chance at earning a leadership scholarship in addition to my athletic aid. The program would help prepare me for a career in sports administration or psychology, and she said my analytical approach to the game makes me an ideal candidate." The silence that followed my announcement was deafening. My father looked up from Jake's recruitment materials with an expression of mild confusion, as if I had just interrupted an important business meeting to discuss weekend plans. My mother paused in her celebration preparations, her smile freezing in place like a politician caught off guard by an unexpected question. Jake continued scrolling through his phone, apparently oblivious to the conversation happening around him. "That's nice, honey," my mother said finally, her voice carrying the tone she used when acknowledging student artwork that showed effort but lacked talent. "It sounds like you're being practical about your option. Sports administration could be a stable career choice for someone with your interest." The word practical hit me like a physical blow, carrying with it all the accumulated weight of years spent being the responsible daughter, the one who figured things out independently, the one whose dreams were valuable only insofar as they led to sensible career outcomes. While Jake's athletic pursuits were treated as investments in greatness, mine were evaluated for their practicality and stability, as if my highest aspiration should be finding a job that would pay the bills rather than pursuing excellence in my chosen field. Our father nodded approvingly but kept most of his attention focused on Jake's scholarship offers. "Those kinds of programs are smart backup plans," he said absently. "You've always been good at seeing the big picture and thinking ahead. That'll serve you well in whatever career you end up choosing." Backup plans. The phrase echoed in my mind as I watched my family seamlessly return to their analysis of Jake's recruitment process. While they were planning for his primary career as a professional athlete, with college serving as a stepping stone to his ultimate goal, my college choice was being framed as a backup plan, a practical alternative to the athletic dreams they assumed I would eventually outgrow. The message was clear that while Jake was pursuing his destiny, I was hedging my bets against an uncertain future. The conversation that followed revealed the full extent of my family's financial priorities and expectations. Our father pulled out a folder containing financial aid calculations and scholarship projections, explaining how Jake's full ride offers would eliminate the need for any family contribution toward his college education. The money they had saved for our education could therefore be redirected toward supporting his professional development, including private coaching, showcase tournaments, and the kind of supplemental training that would give him an edge in his pursuit of a professional baseball career. "We've been incredibly blessed with Jake's opportunities," our mother said, beaming with maternal pride. "The scholarships he's being offered mean we can really invest in his long-term development without worrying about college costs. It's like everything we've worked for as a family is finally paying off." I waited for the second part of this financial discussion, the part where they would explain how my education would be funded and supported. Instead, our father turned to me with the kind of expression usually reserved for delivering disappointing but necessary news. "For you, Maya, we'll need to be more creative with finance. Your partial scholarship is a great start, but we'll need to look into student loans and maybe work-study programs to cover the remaining costs." The inequity of this arrangement was so blatant that I initially assumed I had misunderstood something fundamental about our family's financial situation. Jake's education would be fully funded by scholarships,
with additional family resources available for his professional development, while I would be expected to finance my own education through loans and part-time employment. The implicit message was that his future was worth investing in because it held the potential for significant returns, while mine was a personal expense that I should manage independently. "What about the money you saved for both of our education?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper as I tried to process the implications of what I was hearing. Our father's response would haunt me for years to come. "We saved what we could, but Jake's opportunities represent a chance for real success, the kind that could set him up for life. You're smart and resourceful, and you'll figure out how to make college work. You always do. Besides, your interests are more academic, so student loans are a normal part of that path." The logic was so twisted that it took me several moments to fully comprehend what he was saying. Because Jake had received athletic scholarships, he deserved additional family financial support to maximize his potential. Because I had received only partial scholarships, I should be grateful for what I had gotten and find alternative ways to fund the remainder of my education. My academic interests were being used as justification for why I should be comfortable taking on debt, while his athletic talents were being used as justification for continued family investment. Jake finally looked up from his phone, sensing the tension that had developed around the dinner table. "What's the big deal?" he said with the casual indifference of someone who had never questioned his place in our family's hierarchy. "Maya's always been good at school stuff. She'll probably get academic scholarships and grants that I could never qualify for. We each have our own strengths." This comment revealed the extent to which Jake had internalized our family's narrative about our respective roles and potentials. In his mind, my academic capabilities were consolation prizes that would help me navigate a world where I lacked his natural athletic gift. He genuinely seemed to believe that our different treatment was justified by our different strengths, rather than recognizing that his strengths were being nurtured and invested in while mine were being acknowledged but not supported. The evening continued with more detailed planning for Jake's official campus visits, including discussions about which questions he should ask coaches, what academic programs might serve as backup plans if his professional baseball career didn't materialize, and how our family could best support him during this crucial decision-making period. I sat at the table feeling increasingly invisible, watching my parents pour their energy into optimizing every aspect of Jake's future while treating my college plans as a side project that I would manage independently. The breaking point came when our mother began discussing travel arrangements for Jake's campus visits, explaining how she and our father would accompany him to each school to help evaluate the programs and meet with coaching staff. The level of parental involvement they were planning for his recruitment process stood in stark contrast to the hands-off approach they had taken with my own college search, where I had been expected to handle official visits and coach meetings without family support. "What about my official visit to UC Riverside?" I asked, interrupting their detailed planning session. "Coach Rodriguez invited me to spend a weekend on campus to meet with the leadership program directors and sit in on team practices. Shouldn't we be planning for that too?" The look of surprise on my parents' faces suggested that they had completely forgotten about my recruitment activities. Our father checked his calendar with the kind of distracted attention usually reserved for minor appointments that could be rescheduled if more important obligations arose. Our mother asked practical questions about the cost of travel and whether the visit was really necessary, since I had already been accepted to the program and received my scholarship offer. "Jake's visits are crucial for making informed decisions about programs that will shape his entire future," our father explained with the patience of someone addressing a child who didn't understand the stakes involved. "Your situation is more straightforward. You know what you want to study, you've been accepted to a good program, and the financial aid package is reasonable. There's not as much complexity to navigate." This explanation revealed how fundamentally different my parents' expectations were for our respective college experiences. Jake's choice among multiple prestigious programs was treated as a complex strategic decision, requiring extensive family consultation and support. My acceptance to a single program was viewed as a simple transaction that required minimal family involvement or investment. The implication was that his future held multiple pathways to greatness, while mine had already been determined by practical considerations and academic interest. The psychological impact of this conversation was devastating, but it also provided a moment of clarity that would ultimately prove liberating. For the first time, I understood that my family's inability to see my potential wasn't a temporary oversight that would be corrected once I achieved greater success. It was a fundamental worldview that positioned Jake as the family's investment in greatness and me as the responsible daughter who would find her own way through careful planning and personal determination. That night, I lay in my bed staring at the ceiling and finally allowed myself to fully process the emotional reality of my situation. My parents loved me, but they didn't believe in me the way they believed in Jake. They supported my education, but they didn't see it as an investment in extraordinary potential. They were proud of my achievements, but they viewed them as evidence of good character rather than indicators of future greatness. This realization was simultaneously heartbreaking and empowering. It was heartbreaking because it confirmed that I would never receive the kind of unconditional support and investment that Jake took for granted. It was empowering because it freed me from the exhausting cycle of seeking validation from people who were fundamentally unable to provide. I could stop measuring my worth by their attention and start building something that would make their recognition irrelevant. The next morning, I called Coach Rodriguez and accepted her invitation for an official visit to UC Riverside. I explained that I would be coming alone, which seemed to surprise her initially until I explained my family's focus on Jake's recruitment process. Her response was both understanding and encouraging, as she shared stories of other student athletes who had navigated college selection independently and ultimately found greater success because they had learned to trust their own judgment and advocate for their own interests. During our conversation, Coach Rodriguez mentioned that the leadership program at UC Riverside was designed specifically for students who demonstrated the kind of self-reliance and strategic thinking that I had been forced to develop. The program's philosophy emphasized that the most effective leaders in athletics were often those who had overcome adversity and learned to create opportunities rather than waiting for them to be provided. My family's neglect of my potential, while painful, had actually prepared me for the kind of independence and determination that the program valued most highly. This perspective shift began to transform how I viewed my relationship with my family and my own future prospects. Instead of seeing myself as the overlooked daughter whose achievements went unrecognized, I started to understand that I was developing qualities that would serve me well in a competitive field where success required self-advocacy and strategic thinking. My ability to navigate college recruitment independently, manage my own timeline and priorities, and make decisions without extensive family consultation were actually valuable skills that many of my peers lacked. The campus visit to UC Riverside exceeded my expectations in every possible way. Coach Rodriguez introduced me to other student athletes in the leadership program, all of whom had compelling stories about overcoming obstacles and pursuing unconventional paths to success in athletics. I met with professors in the sports psychology department, who were conducting cutting-edge research on team dynamics and performance optimization. I attended a softball practice where I observed coaching techniques that emphasized mental preparation and strategic execution over pure physical ability. Most importantly, I spent time with current students who were pursuing careers in athletic administration and sports psychology. These conversations opened my eyes to the diverse opportunities available in collegiate and professional athletics for people who understood the game from multiple perspectives. I learned about positions in player development, sports analytics, team management, and organizational leadership that required exactly the kind of analytical thinking and strategic understanding that Coach Rodriguez had identified as my strength. The weekend confirmed that UC Riverside offered not just an education, but a pathway to a career that would allow me to contribute to athletics in meaningful and impactful ways. The leadership program would provide mentorship, internship opportunities, and networking connections that could open doors throughout the sports industry. More importantly, I would be surrounded by people who valued intellectual curiosity, strategic thinking, and the kind of leadership that emerged from overcoming adversity rather than having success handed to you. When I returned home from my campus visit, I was filled with excitement about the possibilities that lay ahead.
I had found my path forward, a route that would allow me to build a career in athletics while developing my unique strengths and interests. For the first time in my life, I felt confident about my future prospects and energized by the challenges that awaited me. My family's reaction to my enthusiasm about UC Riverside was predictably lukewarm. They listened politely as I described the leadership program and my meetings with faculty members, but their attention remained focused on Jake's ongoing recruitment process. They asked practical questions about housing costs and meal plans, treating my college choice as a logistical arrangement rather than the first step toward an exciting career opportunity. The contrast between their engagement with Jake's opportunities and their perfunctory interest in mine had become so routine that it no longer surprised me. What had changed was my need for their validation and approval. I had found mentors who believed in my potential, a program that valued my strengths, and a clear vision for my future that didn't require my family's understanding or investment. Their inability to see my potential was their limitation, not mine. As my senior year of high school progressed, I focused my energy on preparing for the transition to college and the opportunities that awaited me at UC Riverside. I maintained my high academic performance while continuing to excel on the softball field, but I no longer measured my success by my family's reaction to my achievement. Instead, I evaluated my progress based on whether I was developing the skills and knowledge that would serve me well in my chosen career path. This shift in perspective was both subtle and profound. I stopped seeking my parents' approval for my college plans and started making decisions based on my own assessment of what would best prepare me for success in athletic administration. I stopped comparing my recruitment process to Jake's and started appreciating the independence and self-reliance that I was developing through managing my own college transition. I stopped feeling disappointed by my family's lack of investment in my future and started feeling grateful for the opportunity to prove that I could succeed without their financial or emotional support. The most significant change was in how I viewed my relationship with Jake. Instead of resenting his privileged position in our family, I began to feel sympathy for his dependence on others for validation and support. While I was learning to trust my own judgment and advocate for my own interests, he was accustomed to having decisions made for him and problems solved by our parent. While I was developing resilience and self-reliance, he was learning to expect that his needs would be anticipated and his challenges would be managed by others. This perspective allowed me to maintain a loving relationship with my brother, while also protecting myself from the pain of constantly being compared to him. I could celebrate his successes without feeling diminished by them, and I could pursue my own goals without needing his approval or understanding. Most importantly, I could begin to see our different paths as evidence of our different strengths, rather than proof of his superiority and my inadequacy. The decision to attend UC Riverside and pursue the leadership program represented more than just a college choice. It was a declaration of independence from my family's narrow definition of success and their limited vision of my potential. I was choosing to bet on myself rather than waiting for others to recognize my worth. I was choosing to develop my unique strengths rather than trying to compete in areas where others had natural advantage. I was choosing to build a future that would be defined by my own achievements rather than my position relative to my brother's success. As graduation approached and college decisions were finalized, I felt a sense of quiet confidence about the path I had chosen. While Jake would be heading to a prestigious university with full family support and financial backing, I would be embarking on a journey that would require greater independence and self-reliance. While his success would continue to be measured by traditional metrics like statistics and accolades, mine would be evaluated by my ability to develop others and contribute to the success of teams and organizations. The irony was not lost on me that my family's neglect had actually prepared me better for long-term success than Jake's privileged treatment had prepared him. I had learned to solve problems independently, advocate for my own interests, and find motivation from internal rather than external sources. These qualities would serve me well in a competitive field where success required the ability to navigate complex organizational dynamics and create opportunities, rather than simply execute predetermined game plans. As I prepared to leave for college, I carried with me a new understanding of my own worth and potential. I no longer needed my family to believe in me, because I had learned to believe in myself. I no longer needed their investment in my future because I had found mentors and programs that recognized my value. I no longer needed their approval because I had developed my own criteria for measuring success and achievement. The girl who had spent years feeling invisible and undervalued was ready to become a woman who would define her own worth and create her own opportunities for greatness. College life at UC Riverside began with a culture shock that I hadn't fully anticipated. While Jake settled into his dormitory with the fanfare of a recruited athlete, complete with team gear, meal plans, and a social network built around his baseball commitment, I found myself navigating campus independently with nothing but my determination and a partial scholarship that covered most, but not all, of my expenses. My apartment was a cramped space shared with 3 other students, located a 20-minute walk from campus because it was the most affordable option I could find within my limited budget. The leadership program that Coach Rodriguez had described so enthusiastically turned out to be even more demanding than I had expected. Unlike traditional academic programs where students attended classes and completed assignments on predictable schedules, the Leadership Development Initiative required participants to balance coursework with hands-on experience in athletic administration, research projects with faculty mentors, and internship responsibilities that often extended well into the evening hour. The program directors made it clear from the first week that they were preparing us for careers that would require exceptional dedication, strategic thinking, and the ability to perform under pressure. My days began at 5:30 in the morning with strength training sessions that were optional for other students, but mandatory for leadership program participants. The reasoning was that anyone who planned to work in competitive athletics needed to understand the physical and mental demands that athletes faced on a daily basis. After morning workouts, I rushed to shower and change before my first class at 8 o'clock, often grabbing a protein bar and coffee for breakfast because I couldn't afford the campus meal plan that Jake enjoyed as part of his scholarship package. The academic workload was intense, but fascinating. Courses in sports psychology introduced me to the mental aspects of athletic performance, including visualization techniques, pressure management, and team dynamics that I had observed but never studied systematically. Business administration classes taught me about budgeting, marketing, and organizational management in ways that made me understand the complex operations behind every successful athletic program. Research methods courses provided tools for analyzing performance data and identifying trends that could improve coaching strategies and player development. Between classes, I worked 20 hours per week at the campus recreation center, helping with intramural sports programs and youth camps that used university facilities. The job paid minimum wage but provided invaluable experience in event management, conflict resolution, and program administration. I learned to coordinate schedules for dozens of teams, manage equipment inventories, and handle the inevitable disputes that arose when competitive personalities clashed during recreational activity. The position also gave me opportunities to observe how successful programs were structured and managed, knowledge that proved invaluable in my academic coursework. Evenings were dedicated to my internship with the women's softball team, where I assisted coaches with practice planning, statistical analysis, and recruitment activity. This role allowed me to apply theoretical knowledge from my classes to real-world situations, while developing relationships with coaching staff who became informal mentors. I learned to break down game footage to identify opposing teams' weaknesses, compile scouting reports that influenced strategic decisions, and communicate complex analytical insights in ways that players could understand and implement during competition. The physical and emotional toll of maintaining this schedule was enormous. I survived on 4 to 5 hours of sleep most nights, sustained by determination and the growing realization that I was developing skills and knowledge that few people my age possess. While my classmates struggled with basic concepts in sports psychology and business administration, I was applying these principles in real-time situations where mistakes had immediate consequences. While they wrote theoretical papers about team leadership, I was observing and implementing leadership strategies that improved actual team performance. The contrast with Jake's college experience became apparent during our infrequent phone conversations and family visits. His days revolved around baseball practice, team meetings, and academic coursework that was specifically designed to accommodate his athletic commitment. He had access to tutoring services, priority registration for classes, and academic advisors who helped him navigate degree requirements around his baseball schedule. His social life centered on team activities and events organized by the athletic department, creating a built-in community of friends and supporters who shared his interests and goals. When Jake described his college experience during family dinners, our parents listened with rapt attention and asked detailed questions about his coaches, teammates, and performance statistics. They wanted to know about his batting average, fielding percentage, and the interest that professional scouts were showing in his development. The conversation always included speculation about his professional prospects and discussions of how his college experience was positioning him for a career in baseball. My updates about the leadership program were received with polite interest but limited engagement. When I described research projects or internship responsibilities, my family responded with general encouragement, but seemed unable to grasp the significance of what I was accomplishing. They understood that I was working hard and performing well academically, but they couldn't appreciate how my experiences were preparing me for a specialized career that required unique skills and knowledge. To them, my college years represented a period of personal growth and education that would eventually lead to a stable job, not a launching pad for professional excellence in a competitive field. The financial reality of my situation became increasingly stressful as my sophomore year progressed. While my partial scholarship covered tuition and most fees, I was responsible for housing, meals, textbooks, and living expenses that added up to several $100s each month. My work-study earnings covered basic necessities, but there was no margin for unexpected expenses or the kind of social activities that most college students took for granted. I learned to buy used textbooks, cook simple meals in my shared apartment, and decline invitations to events that required spending money I didn't have. The contrast with Jake's financial security was particularly painful during family visits, when he would describe expensive team dinners, road trips to away games, and social events that his scholarship and family support made possible. He could focus entirely on his athletic and academic development, without worrying about work schedules or budget constraints, while I was constantly calculating whether I could afford new cleats or whether I should skip lunch to save money for required course material. Despite these challenges, I was thriving academically and professionally in ways that surprised even my most supportive mentors. My grades placed me at the top of the leadership program, and my practical experience had given me insights that impressed faculty members and industry professionals. Professor Dr. Sarah Martinez, who directed the Sports Psychology Research Lab, began including me in projects that were typically reserved for graduate students. Coach Rodriguez regularly sought my input on recruitment strategies and team development initiatives that went far beyond my official internship responsibilities. The breakthrough moment that would define my future came during the spring semester of my sophomore year, when Dr. Martinez invited me to assist with a consulting project for a minor league baseball organization that was struggling with player development and team chemistry issues. The assignment required analyzing performance data, conducting interviews with players and coaches, and developing recommendations for improving organizational culture and individual player performance. For the first time, I would be applying my knowledge and skills in a professional context with real financial and competitive stakes. The consulting project introduced me to the Riverside Rapids, the local minor league team where Jake would eventually play. The organization was owned by a former major league player who had invested his savings into creating a development program for players who had been overlooked by major league organizations. The team's philosophy emphasized mental preparation, strategic thinking, and the kind of comprehensive player development that went beyond traditional physical training and statistical analysis. My role in the project involved conducting psychological assessments of players who were struggling with confidence issues, analyzing video footage to identify mechanical problems that were affecting performance, and developing individualized training programs that addressed both mental and physical aspects of player development. The work required everything I had learned in my coursework while demanding creativity and problem-solving skills that couldn't be taught in any classroom. The results exceeded everyone's expectations, including my own. Players who had been struggling with batting slumps,
began to show significant improvement after implementing the mental preparation techniques I had recommended. Pitchers who had been inconsistent found new effectiveness after adjusting their approach based on the mechanical analysis I had provided. Most importantly, the overall team chemistry improved dramatically as players began to understand and support each other's development, rather than competing destructively for limited opportunity. The success of this project led to additional consulting opportunities with other minor league organizations, and eventually with college programs that were seeking innovative approaches to player development. By my junior year, I was earning significant income from these consulting arrangements, while maintaining my academic performance and continuing to develop expertise that was increasingly in demand throughout the baseball industry. The transformation in how others perceived my potential was dramatic and gratifying. Faculty members who had initially viewed me as a hard-working but unremarkable student began recommending me for prestigious internships and research opportunities. Coaching professionals who had dismissed me as an inexperienced undergraduate began seeking my insights on complex player development challenges. Industry contacts who had initially been skeptical about my qualifications began offering full-time positions that would begin immediately after graduation. Most significantly, I began to see myself differently. The girl who had spent years feeling invisible and undervalued was becoming a young woman who commanded respect and recognition based on her expertise and results. I no longer measured my worth by my family's attention or compared my achievements to Jake's, because I was building something entirely different, something that existed independently of their understanding or approval. The moment that would publicly validate everything I had been working toward arrived during my senior year, when the Riverside Rapids announced that they were hiring me as their director of player development, making me the youngest person ever to hold such a position in professional baseball. The role would involve overseeing all aspects of player training and development, from psychological preparation to mechanical instruction to strategic analysis. The salary was higher than what many people earned after decades in traditional careers, and the position offered opportunities for advancement throughout the baseball industry. The announcement coincided with Jake's senior season, when he was finally attracting serious attention from professional scouts. His performance had been solid but not spectacular throughout his college career, and his draft prospects were uncertain heading into his final year. The irony that his younger sister was being hired for a professional baseball position while his own professional future remained questionable was not lost on anyone who followed local sports news. The family dinner where I announced my job offer was one of the most surreal experiences of my entire life. For years, these gatherings had centered on Jake's achievements and future prospects, with my updates relegated to brief mentions before the conversation returned to his more important news. This time I was the one with life-changing announcements that commanded attention and generated excitement. My parents' reaction was a mixture of pride, confusion, and something that looked suspiciously like regret. They were clearly pleased that I had secured such an impressive position, but they seemed unable to fully comprehend how someone they had always viewed as practical and academically focused had managed to achieve such success in the athletic world they had assumed belonged to Jake. Their questions revealed how little they understood about the career I had been building or the expertise I had been developing throughout my college years. Jake's response was more complex and revealed the extent to which he had internalized our family's assumptions about our respective potential. He congratulated me with genuine warmth, but also seemed bewildered by how his sister had managed to achieve professional success in baseball while his own future in the sport remained uncertain. For the first time in our relationship, I was the sibling with clear prospects and concrete achievements in the field that had always defined his identity and self-worth. The conversation that evening included discussions of salary, responsibilities, and career advancement opportunities that positioned me as the family's new success story in professional athletics. My parents asked detailed questions about my work responsibilities and future prospects with the kind of engagement they had previously reserved for Jake's achievement. The reversal of roles was so complete that Jake eventually excused himself from the dinner table, claiming he needed to prepare for an upcoming game. The graduation ceremony at UC Riverside provided the perfect setting for the public recognition of everything I had accomplished during my college year. I was selected as the student speaker for the leadership program, an honor that required delivering remarks to several thousand graduates, faculty members and family members about the transformative power of education and the importance of pursuing unconventional paths to success. As I stood at the podium looking out over the audience, I spotted my family in the crowd. My parents sat in the front section reserved for families of distinguished graduates, their faces showing a mixture of pride and amazement that their practical daughter had become the featured speaker at such a prestigious event. Jake sat between them, applauding politely but clearly struggling to process how dramatically our roles had been reversed since high school. My speech focused on the importance of defining success for yourself rather than accepting others' limitations or expectations. I talked about the value of developing expertise in areas that others might overlook or undervalue, and the satisfaction that comes from building something meaningful rather than simply following predetermined paths. I didn't mention my family specifically, but anyone who knew our story could hear the personal experience behind my words about overcoming doubt and proving that unconventional paths can lead to extraordinary outcomes. The response to my speech was overwhelmingly positive, with faculty members, fellow graduates, and audience members approaching me afterward to express appreciation for my message and curiosity about my future plans. Several representatives from major league organizations who had attended the ceremony introduced themselves and expressed interest in my work with the Riverside Rapids. The recognition felt surreal after years of having my achievements minimized or overlooked, but it also felt deeply deserved. The most meaningful moment came when Coach Rodriguez approached me after the ceremony with tears in her eyes. She had been instrumental in helping me discover my potential and pursue opportunities that my family had never imagined possible. Seeing me succeed at such a high level represented validation of her belief in unconventional talent and her commitment to developing students who might not fit traditional molds but possessed unique capabilities. "You did exactly what I knew you could do," she told me as we embraced. "You found your own way to excellence and proved that there are many different paths to success in athletics. I'm proud of you, but more importantly, I hope you're proud of yourself." I was proud of myself, perhaps for the first time in my life. I had built something extraordinary without waiting for permission or approval from the people whose validation I had once craved. I had developed expertise that was valued and respected by professionals throughout the baseball industry. I had created opportunities rather than simply responding to them, and I had proven that unconventional paths could lead to conventional success. The transition from college to professional life happened seamlessly as my work with the Riverside Rapids expanded to include responsibilities that went far beyond traditional player development. I was involved in recruitment decisions, strategic planning, and organizational development initiatives that influenced every aspect of the team's operation. My success rate with struggling players became legendary throughout the minor league system, leading to consulting requests from major league organizations and speaking opportunities at professional conferences. Within 2 years of graduation, I had been promoted to assistant general manager of the Rapids, with responsibilities that included player personnel decisions, budget management, and long-term strategic planning. My salary had increased substantially and my professional reputation had grown to the point where I was regularly featured in industry publications as an example of innovative thinking in baseball operations. The girl who had once been dismissed as practical and academic had become one of the most respected young executives in professional baseball. The moment that would bring everything full circle arrived when the Rapids announced that they were retiring my college jersey number and honoring my contributions to the organization at a special ceremony before their biggest game of the season. The irony was that Jake was now playing for the Rapids, having been signed as a free agent after going undrafted following his college career. The brother who had once dismissed my achievements would be playing for the team where his sister had become a celebrated executive. As I stood on the pitcher's mound at Memorial Stadium, holding the microphone and looking out at thousands of fans who were applauding my accomplishments, I thought about the journey that had brought me to this moment. The family that had once treated my dreams as consolation prizes was now sitting in the front row, forced to acknowledge that the daughter they had overlooked had achieved something extraordinary. The brother who had questioned whether I had ever accomplished anything was warming up in the bullpen for a team that existed largely because of my contributions to their success. My speech that evening focused on the importance of believing in yourself when others cannot see your potential and the satisfaction that comes from building something meaningful through persistence and hard work rather than natural talent alone. I talked about the value of finding mentors who recognize unconventional strengths and the importance of pursuing excellence in areas that others might undervalue or misunderstand. Success in any field requires more than just talent, I told the crowd. It requires vision, determination, and the courage to pursue your goals even when the people closest to you cannot understand what you're trying to achieve. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give yourself is the freedom to define success on your own terms rather than accepting limitations that others try to impose on you. The applause that followed my remarks was deafening, but what mattered most to me was the expression on Jake's face as he watched from the dugout. For the first time in our relationship, he was looking at me with genuine respect and admiration, rather than the polite tolerance he had always shown for his little sister's achievement. The brother who had once questioned my accomplishments was now playing for an organization that existed largely because of my vision and expertise. After the ceremony, my family approached me with a mixture of pride and something that looked like regret. My parents, who had spent years pouring their resources into Jake's baseball dreams while treating mine as expensive hobbies, now had to confront the reality that their overlooked daughter had achieved far more professional success than their celebrated son. Their congratulations were sincere but carried the weight of missed opportunities and misplaced priorities. Jake's conversation with me was the most honest we had ever shared. He apologized for the years of dismissiveness and acknowledged that he had never understood the magnitude of what I was building while he was focused on his own athletic pursuit. He admitted that watching me succeed in the baseball world that he had always considered his exclusive domain had forced him to reconsider many of his assumptions about talent, achievement, and the different paths to success. I always thought success in baseball meant being the best player, he told me as we stood together outside the stadium. I never understood that there were other ways to contribute, other forms of excellence that were just as important. You found a way to impact the game that I never even considered, and you did it by being yourself rather than trying to be someone else. The reconciliation with my family was gratifying but also felt somewhat irrelevant to my current life. I had built a career and an identity that existed independently of their approval or understanding. Their recognition was nice to receive, but it no longer felt necessary for my sense of self-worth or professional confidence. I had learned to define success for myself and to find validation in results rather than relationship.
The years that followed brought continued professional growth and recognition. I was eventually recruited by a major league organization as their director of player development, overseeing minor league operations for one of the most successful franchises in baseball. My innovations in player psychology and development became industry standards that were adopted throughout professional baseball. I was featured in national publications as one of the most influential young executives in sports, and my consulting work expanded to include organizations in other professional sports. Looking back on the journey from overlooked younger sister to respected industry leader, I realized that my family's neglect had actually been a gift in disguise. It had forced me to develop independence, resilience, and self-reliance that served me well in a competitive industry where success required the ability to navigate complex challenges without external support. While Jake had learned to depend on others for validation and support, I had learned to trust my own judgment and create my own opportunities. The girl who had once felt invisible in her own family had become a woman who commanded respect and recognition throughout professional baseball. The achievements that had once gone unnoticed were now celebrated and studied by industry professionals. The potential that had been dismissed as impractical had been transformed into expertise that was valued and sought after by the most successful organizations in sports. Most importantly, I had learned that real success comes not from meeting others' expectations, but from exceeding your own. The recognition I eventually received from my family was gratifying, but it paled in comparison to the satisfaction of knowing that I had built something extraordinary through my own vision and determination. The applause that night at Memorial Stadium was wonderful to hear, but the quiet confidence I had developed over years of proving myself was far more valuable than any external validation could ever be. The transition to college at UC Riverside marked the beginning of the most challenging and transformative period of my life. While Jake settled into his prestigious university with the comfort of full financial support, and a ready-made social network centered around his baseball team, I found myself navigating an entirely different reality. My shared apartment was a cramped space 20 minutes from campus, chosen not for convenience, but because it was the only housing I could afford within my limited budget. My 3 roommates were strangers who had also been drawn to the cheapest available option, creating a living situation that was functional but far from comfortable. The leadership development program that had seemed like such an incredible opportunity during my campus visit revealed itself to be more demanding than I had ever imagined. Unlike traditional college programs where students attended classes and completed assignments on predictable schedules, this initiative required participants to juggle multiple responsibilities simultaneously. Academic coursework was just one component of a comprehensive experience that included hands-on administrative work, research responsibilities, internship commitments, and leadership training that often extended well beyond normal business hours. My typical day began at 5 in the morning with mandatory fitness training sessions that were designed to help program participants understand the physical demands that athletes faced daily. The logic was sound but exhausting, as anyone planning to work in competitive athletics needed first-hand experience with the dedication and discipline required for peak performance. After these early morning workouts, I had exactly 30 minutes to shower, change, and grab breakfast before my first class at 8 o'clock. Coffee and protein bars became my primary sources of nutrition during these rushed transitions, as I couldn't afford the campus meal plan that Jake enjoyed as part of his comprehensive scholarship package. The academic workload was intellectually stimulating but relentlessly demanding. Sports psychology courses introduced me to the mental aspects of athletic performance, covering topics like visualization techniques, pressure management, goal setting, and team dynamics that I had observed intuitively but never studied systematically. These classes required extensive reading, research papers, and practical applications that demanded both theoretical understanding and real-world implementation. Business administration courses taught me about financial management, marketing strategies, organizational leadership, and operational efficiency in ways that revealed the complex infrastructure behind every successful athletic program. Research methodology classes provided tools for statistical analysis, data interpretation, and evidence-based decision-making that were essential for modern sports management. I learned to evaluate performance metrics, identify meaningful trends, and present analytical findings in formats that could influence coaching decisions and administrative policy. The coursework was challenging for any student, but it was particularly difficult for someone who was simultaneously working multiple jobs to pay for living expenses that my partial scholarship didn't cover. Between classes, I worked 25 hours per week at the campus recreation center, where I assisted with intramural sports programs, youth camps, and facility management. The position paid minimum wage, but provided invaluable experience in event coordination, conflict resolution, customer service, and program administration. I learned to manage complex schedules for dozens of teams, maintain equipment inventories, handle budget constraints, and resolve the inevitable disputes that arose when competitive personalities clashed during recreational activity. The job also gave me opportunities to observe successful program management in action, knowledge that proved essential for my academic coursework and future career aspirations. Evenings were dedicated to my internship with the women's softball team, where I assisted coaching staff with practice planning, statistical analysis, recruitment activities, and player development initiatives. This role allowed me to apply theoretical knowledge from my classes to real-world situations, while building relationships with experienced professionals who became informal mentors and career advisors. I learned to analyze game footage to identify opposing teams' strategic weaknesses, compile comprehensive scouting reports that influenced tactical decisions, and communicate complex analytical insights in ways that players could understand and implement during high-pressure competition. The physical and emotional toll of maintaining this schedule was enormous and unrelenting. I survived on 4 hours of sleep most nights, sustained by determination and the growing realization that I was developing a unique combination of skills and knowledge that few people my age possess. While my classmates struggled with basic concepts in sports psychology and business administration, I was applying these principles in real-time situations where mistakes had immediate consequences for team performance and individual athlete development. While they wrote theoretical papers about leadership and teamwork, I was observing and implementing strategies that improved actual organizational effectiveness and competitive results. The financial reality of my situation created constant stress that affected every aspect of my college experience. My partial scholarship covered tuition and most fees, but I was responsible for housing costs, meal expenses, textbooks, transportation, and basic living needs that totaled several $100s each month. My work-study earnings covered these necessities, but left no margin for unexpected expenses or the social activities that most college students considered normal parts of their educational experience. I learned to buy used textbooks, cook simple meals in my shared apartment kitchen, walk or bike to campus regardless of weather conditions, and decline invitations to events that required spending money I simply didn't have. The contrast with Jake's financial security became particularly apparent during family visits and phone conversations, when he would describe expensive team dinners, travel opportunities to away games, spring training trips to premier facility, and social events that his scholarship and family support made possible. He could focus entirely on his athletic and academic development without worrying about work schedules, budget constraints, or the constant calculations that dominated my daily decision-making process. While he discussed which restaurants the team frequented and what entertainment options were available near campus, I was determining whether I could afford new softball cleats or whether I should skip lunch to save money for required course material. Despite these overwhelming challenges, I was thriving academically and professionally in ways that surprised even my most supportive mentors and faculty advisors. My grades consistently placed me at the top of the leadership program, and my practical experience in multiple athletic environments had given me insights that impressed seasoned professionals throughout the sports industry. Professor Sarah Martinez, who directed the Sports Psychology Research Laboratory, began including me in projects that were typically reserved for graduate students or experienced professionals. Coach Rodriguez regularly sought my input on recruitment strategies, team development initiatives, and program management decisions that went far beyond my official internship responsibility. The breakthrough moment that would define the trajectory of my entire career came during the spring semester of my sophomore year, when Dr. Martinez invited me to assist with a comprehensive consulting project for a minor league baseball organization that was struggling with persistent player development challenges and team chemistry issues. The assignment required analyzing complex performance data, conducting in-depth interviews with players and coaching staff, observing team dynamics during practices and games, and developing evidence-based recommendations for improving organizational culture and individual player performance outcomes. The consulting project introduced me to the Riverside Rapids, the local minor league team that would eventually become the setting for the most significant achievements of my career. The organization was owned by Marcus Williams, a former major league player who had invested his savings and reputation into creating an innovative development program for players who had been overlooked or undervalued by major league organizations. The team's philosophy emphasized mental preparation, strategic thinking, character development, and the kind of comprehensive player growth that went far beyond traditional physical training and statistical analysis. My specific role in the consulting project involved conducting psychological assessments of players who were struggling with confidence issues, mechanical problems, or performance anxiety that was limiting their effectiveness on the field. I analyzed video footage to identify subtle technical problems that were affecting batting mechanics, pitching delivery, or defensive position. Most importantly, I developed individualized training programs that addressed both mental and physical aspects of player development, creating holistic approaches to improvement that considered each athlete's unique psychological profile and learning style. The work required everything I had learned in my academic coursework while demanding creativity, problem-solving skills, and interpersonal abilities that couldn't be taught in any classroom setting. I had to earn the trust of professional athletes who were initially skeptical about taking advice from a college student, communicate complex psychological concepts in practical terms that players could implement immediately, and develop training protocols that produced measurable results within reasonable timeframes. The pressure was intense, as the organization's investment
in this consulting project represented a significant financial commitment with clear expectations for improved performance outcomes. The results exceeded everyone's expectations, including my own conservative projections. Players who had been struggling with extended batting slumps began showing significant improvement within weeks of implementing the mental preparation techniques and mechanical adjustments I had recommended. Pitchers who had been inconsistent with their command found new effectiveness after adopting the psychological strategies and delivery modifications I had developed specifically for their individual needs. Most importantly, the overall team chemistry improved dramatically as players began supporting each other's development rather than competing destructively for limited advancement opportunity. The success of this initial consulting project led to additional opportunities with other minor league organizations and eventually with college programs that were seeking innovative approaches to player development and team management. Word spread throughout the baseball community about the young consultant who was achieving remarkable results with struggling players and dysfunctional team dynamics. By my junior year, I was earning substantial income from these consulting arrangements while maintaining my academic performance and continuing to develop expertise that was increasingly in demand throughout the professional baseball industry. The transformation in how others perceived my potential and capabilities was dramatic and deeply gratifying. Faculty members who had initially viewed me as a hard-working but unremarkable student began recommending me for prestigious internships, research opportunities, and professional conferences where I could network with industry leaders. Coaching professionals who had initially dismissed me as an inexperienced undergraduate began actively seeking my insights on complex player development, challenges, and organizational management issues. Industry contacts who had been skeptical about my qualifications began offering full-time positions that would begin immediately after graduation, with salaries that exceeded what many experienced professionals earned in their established career. Most significantly, I began to see myself differently and to develop a sense of professional confidence that was based on concrete achievements rather than external validation. The girl who had spent years feeling invisible and undervalued was becoming a young woman who commanded respect and recognition based on her expertise, results, and innovative contributions to her chosen field. I no longer measured my worth by my family's attention or compared my achievements to Jake's, because I was building something entirely different, something that existed independently of their understanding, approval, or financial support. The moment that would publicly validate everything I had been working toward arrived during my senior year, when the Riverside Rapids announced that they were hiring me as their director of player development, making me the youngest person ever to hold such a position in professional baseball. The role would involve overseeing all aspects of player training and development, from psychological preparation and mental conditioning to mechanical instruction and strategic analysis. The salary was higher than what many people earned after decades in traditional careers, and the position offered clear pathways for advancement throughout the baseball industry at both minor and major league level. The announcement of my hiring coincided perfectly with Jake's senior season, when he was finally attracting some attention from professional scouts, but facing uncertain prospects for his post-college baseball career. His performance throughout college had been solid but not spectacular, and his draft status remained questionable heading into his final year of eligibility. The irony that his younger sister was being hired for a prestigious professional baseball position, while his own future in this remained uncertain, was not lost on anyone who followed local sports news or understood the dynamics of our family's long-standing investment in his athletic development. The family dinner where I announced my job offer was one of the most surreal and emotionally complex experiences of my entire life. For years, these gatherings had centered exclusively on Jake's achievements, upcoming games, recruitment developments, and future prospects, with my updates relegated to brief mentions before the conversation inevitably returned to his more important news. This time I was the one with life-changing announcements that commanded attention and generated genuine excitement from everyone around the table. My parents' reaction was a fascinating mixture of pride, confusion, amazement, and something that looked unmistakably like regret. They were clearly pleased and impressed that I had secured such a prestigious position in professional sports, but they seemed genuinely unable to comprehend how someone they had always viewed as practical, academically focused, and destined for conventional career paths had managed to achieve such remarkable success in the athletic world they had assumed belonged exclusively to Jake. Their questions revealed how little they had understood about the career I had been systematically building, or the specialized expertise I had been developing throughout my college year. Jake's response was more complex and revealed the extent to which he had internalized our family's assumptions about our respective potential and likely life trajectory. He congratulated me with genuine warmth and obvious pride in my accomplishments, but he also seemed bewildered and somewhat threatened by how his sister had managed to achieve significant professional success in baseball while his own future in the sport remained highly uncertain. For the first time in our sibling relationship, I was the one with clear prospects, concrete achievements, and recognition from respected professionals in the field that had always defined his identity and self-worth. The conversation that evening included detailed discussions of my salary, job responsibilities, advancement opportunities, and long-term career prospects that positioned me as the family's new success story in professional athletics. My parents asked sophisticated questions about my work responsibilities and future possibilities, with the kind of intense engagement they had previously reserved exclusively for Jake's achievements and opportunity. The complete reversal of roles was so dramatic that Jake eventually excused himself from the dinner table, claiming he needed to prepare for an upcoming game, but clearly struggling to process how fundamentally the family dynamics had shifted. The graduation ceremony at UC Riverside provided the perfect public setting for the recognition of everything I had accomplished during my transformative college years. I was selected as the student speaker for the leadership program, an honor that required delivering formal remarks to several thousand graduates, faculty members, family members, and distinguished guests about the transformative power of education and the importance of pursuing unconventional paths to personal and professional success. As I stood at the podium looking out over the sea of faces in the audience, I spotted my family sitting in the front section that was reserved for families of distinguished graduates and special honorees. My parents sat with expressions that showed a mixture of pride, amazement, and dawning realization that their practical daughter had become the featured speaker at such a prestigious academic and professional event. Jake sat between them, applauding politely but clearly struggling to process how dramatically and completely our roles had been reversed since our high school year. My speech focused on the fundamental importance of defining success for yourself rather than accepting others' limitations, expectations, or narrow definitions of achievement and potential. I talked about the tremendous value of developing expertise in areas that others might overlook, undervalue, or fail to understand, and the deep satisfaction that comes from building something meaningful and impactful through your own vision and determination rather than simply following predetermined paths that others have laid out for you. I didn't mention my family specifically or reference personal experiences directly, but anyone who knew our story could clearly hear the lived experience behind my words about overcoming doubt, proving skeptics wrong, and demonstrating that unconventional paths can lead to extraordinary outcomes. The response to my speech was overwhelmingly positive and emotionally moved. Faculty members, fellow graduates, family members in the audience, and distinguished guests approached me afterward to express appreciation for my inspiring message and genuine curiosity about my future plans and career aspirations. Several representatives from major league organizations who had attended the ceremony specifically to observe the graduation introduced themselves and expressed serious interest in my innovative work with the Riverside Rapids and my potential contributions to their own player development program. The recognition felt surreal and almost overwhelming after years of having my achievements minimized, overlooked, or treated as secondary to more important family priorities. At the same time, it felt deeply deserved and long overdue, representing public validation of the expertise I had developed and the value I had created through years of dedicated work and continuous learning. The applause and recognition were gratifying, but even more meaningful was the quiet confidence I had developed in my own abilities and the secure knowledge that I had built something substantial that would continue to grow and evolve throughout my career. The most emotionally significant moment of the entire graduation ceremony came when Coach Rodriguez approached me afterward with tears in her eyes and obvious pride in her voice. She had been instrumental in helping me discover my potential, pursue opportunities that my family had never imagined possible, and develop the confidence to define success on my own terms rather than accepting others' limiting expectations. Seeing me achieve recognition at such a high level represented validation of her belief in unconventional talent and her professional commitment to developing students who might not fit traditional molds, but possessed unique capabilities that could contribute significantly to their chosen field. "You accomplished exactly what I always knew you could accomplish," she told me as we embraced warmly. "You found your own distinctive path to excellence and proved conclusively that there are many different routes to success in athletics and sports management. I'm incredibly proud of you and everything you've achieved, but more importantly, I hope you're genuinely proud of yourself and everything you've built through your own efforts." I was proud of myself, perhaps for the first time in my entire life. I had built something extraordinary without waiting for permission, approval, or financial support from the people whose validation I had once desperately craved. I had developed expertise that was genuinely valued and actively sought by respected professionals throughout the baseball industry. I had created opportunities rather than simply responding to them, and I had proven definitively that unconventional paths pursued with dedication and strategic thinking could lead to conventional measures of success and professional recognition. The transition from college to professional life happened seamlessly and naturally as my consulting work with the Riverside Rapids had already established me as a full-time member of their organization in all but title. My official promotion to Director of Player Development expanded my responsibilities to include areas that went far beyond traditional player coaching and training. I became involved in recruitment decisions, strategic planning sessions, organizational development initiatives, and management choices that influenced every aspect of the team's operations and competitive effectiveness. My success rate with struggling players and problematic team dynamics quickly became legendary throughout the minor league system, leading to consulting requests from major league organizations and speaking opportunities at professional conferences where industry leaders gathered to discuss best practices and innovative approaches. Within 18 months of graduation, I was regularly featured in trade publications as an example of revolutionary thinking in baseball operations and player development methodology. The professional recognition continued to accelerate as my innovative approaches produced consistently impressive results. Within 2 years of joining the Riverside Rapids as Director of Player Development, I had been promoted to Assistant General Manager, with expanded responsibilities that included player personnel decisions, budget management, long-term strategic planning, and organizational leadership that affected every department within the franchise. My salary had increased substantially with each promotion, and my professional reputation had grown to the point where I was regularly consulted by major league executives, seeking advice on complex organizational challenges. The girl who had once been dismissed as practical and academically focused had become one of the most respected and influential young executives in professional baseball. My innovative methodologies for player development had been adopted by organizations throughout the minor leagues, and several major league teams had attempted to recruit me for senior management positions that would have represented significant career advancement and financial improvement. The moment that would bring my entire journey full circle arrived when the Riverside Rapids announced that they were retiring my college jersey number and honoring my contributions to the organization with a special ceremony before their most important game of the season. The delicious irony was that Jake was now playing for the Rapids, having been signed as a free agent after going undrafted following his college career. The brother who had once questioned whether I had ever accomplished anything meaningful would be playing for the team where his sister had become a celebrated executive and organizational leader. As I stood on the pitcher's mound at Memorial Stadium, holding the microphone and looking out at thousands of fans who were enthusiastically applauding my professional accomplishments, I reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought me from overlooked younger sister to respected industry leader. The family that had once treated my dreams as consolation prizes and my achievements as footnotes to more important news was now sitting in the front row, forced to publicly acknowledge that the daughter they had systematically overlooked had achieved something truly remarkable in the field they had always considered Jake's exclusive domain. My speech that evening focused on the fundamental importance of believing in yourself when others cannot or will not see your potential, and the profound satisfaction that comes from building something meaningful through persistence, innovation, and hard work rather than relying solely on natural talent or inherited advantage. I talked about the tremendous value of finding mentors who recognize unconventional strengths, and the critical importance of pursuing excellence in areas that others might undervalue, misunderstand, or dismiss as impractical. Success in any competitive field requires much more than just raw talent or natural ability, I told the crowd with conviction born from years of lived experience. It requires vision, determination, strategic thinking, and the courage to pursue your goals even when the people closest to you cannot understand what you're trying to achieve or why it matters to you. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give yourself is the freedom to define success on your own terms rather than accepting limitations that others try to impose on you based on their own narrow understanding of what's possible. The thunderous applause that followed my remarks was deeply gratifying, but what mattered most to me was the expression of genuine respect and admiration on Jake's face as he watched from the dugout. For the first time in our entire sibling relationship, he was looking at me not with the polite tolerance he had always shown for his little sister's academic achievements, but with the kind of professional respect that one successful athlete shows for another's accomplishment.
In suburban Phoenix, 43-year-old Sarah Mitchell discovered an old photograph that would unravel her entire reality. What began as spring cleaning became a journey into her past when she noticed something impossible in the background. Before we continue, drop a comment if you've ever experienced déjà vu. The brother who had once questioned my ability to accomplish anything meaningful was now playing for an organization that existed largely because of my strategic vision and innovative expertise. After the ceremony concluded, and the crowd began to disperse, my family approached me with a complex mixture of pride, amazement, and unmistakable regret for opportunities missed and potential overlooked. My parents, who had spent years systematically pouring their emotional energy and financial resources into Jake's baseball dreams, while treating mine as expensive hobbies that would eventually be abandoned for practical careers, now had to confront the uncomfortable reality that their overlooked daughter had achieved far more professional success and industry recognition than their celebrated son. Their congratulations were sincere and heartfelt, but they carried the heavy weight of missed opportunities, misplaced priorities, and the dawning recognition of how fundamentally they had misunderstood and underestimated my potential. They asked detailed questions about my career trajectory and future plans with the kind of intense interest they had previously reserved exclusively for Jake's athletic development and professional prospects. Jake's private conversation with me after the public ceremony was the most honest and emotionally authentic exchange we had ever shared as siblings. He apologized sincerely for years of dismissiveness and acknowledged that he had never understood the magnitude of what I was building while he remained focused exclusively on his own athletic pursuits and professional aspirations. He admitted that watching me achieve such remarkable success in the baseball world, that he had always considered his exclusive domain, had forced him to fundamentally reconsider many of his assumptions about talent, achievement, professional success, and the many different paths that could lead to meaningful contributions in competitive athletics. I always thought success in baseball meant being the best player on the field, he told me with genuine humility as we stood together outside the stadium. I never understood or even considered that there were other equally important ways to contribute to the game, other forms of excellence that were just as valuable and impactful as playing ability. You found a way to influence and improve baseball that I never even imagined was possible, and you did it by developing and leveraging your own unique strengths, rather than trying to become someone you weren't meant to be. The reconciliation with my family was emotionally gratifying and provided a sense of closure to years of feeling undervalued and misunderstood, but it also felt somewhat irrelevant to my current life and professional identity. I had successfully built a career and developed a sense of self-worth that existed completely independently of their approval, understanding, or financial support. Their recognition was pleasant to receive and helped heal old emotional wounds, but it no longer felt necessary for my professional confidence or personal sense of achievement and value. The years that followed brought continued professional growth, industry recognition, and career advancement opportunities that exceeded my most optimistic projections. I was eventually recruited by a major league organization as their director of player development, overseeing minor league operations for one of the most successful and well-respected franchises in professional baseball. My innovations in player psychology, team dynamics, and development methodologies became industry standards that were studied and adopted throughout professional baseball at all levels. I was featured prominently in national publications as one of the most influential and innovative young executives in professional sport, and my consulting work expanded to include organizations in other professional sports that were seeking to apply my methodologies to their own player development challenges. Speaking engagements at industry conferences, academic institutions, and professional development seminars became regular components of my career, allowing me to share insights and mentor the next generation of sports management professionals. Looking back on the complete transformation from overlooked younger sister to respected industry leader, I realized that my family's systematic neglect had actually been an unexpected gift that prepared me for professional success in ways that traditional support might not have achieved. Their lack of investment had forced me to develop independence, resilience, self-reliance, and problem-solving abilities that served me exceptionally well in a competitive industry where success required the ability to navigate complex challenges without external support or guidance. While Jake had learned to depend on others for validation, financial support, and career direction, I had learned to trust my own judgment, create my own opportunities, and find motivation from internal rather than external sources. These qualities proved invaluable in professional environments where advancement required the ability to identify problems, develop innovative solutions, and implement changes without waiting for permission or approval from supervisors or colleagues. The girl who had once felt invisible and unimportant in her own family had become a woman who commanded respect and recognition throughout professional baseball. The achievements that had once gone unnoticed or been dismissed as consolation prizes were now celebrated and studied by industry professionals seeking to understand and replicate my methodology. The potential that had been overlooked as impractical or unrealistic had been transformed into expertise that was actively sought and highly valued by the most successful organizations in professional sport. Most importantly, I had learned that genuine success and lasting satisfaction come not from meeting others' expectations or earning their approval, but from exceeding your own highest aspirations and creating value that makes a meaningful difference in your chosen field. The recognition I eventually received from my family was emotionally satisfying and provided personal closure, but it paled in comparison to the deep sense of fulfillment that came from knowing I had built something extraordinary through my own vision, determination, and innovative thinking. The applause that filled Memorial Stadium that night was wonderful to hear and represented public validation of years of dedicated work. But the quiet confidence I had developed over years of proving myself to demanding professional standards was far more valuable than any external recognition could ever be. I had learned to define success for myself, and that internal compass would continue to guide me toward even greater achievements in the years ahead. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.